Silk Road and its maritime component connected the people and economies east and west for over 1,000 years before the Industrial Revolution made its global impact. And during the Ming Dynasty, the explorer Admiral Zheng He's sea voyages connected China with the world and contributed to dialogue across civilizations. What can be learned from Admiral Zheng He's travels along what is known as the Maritime Silk Road? How does the heritage from the ancient Silk Road inspire today's Belt and Road Initiative, and how can the Belt and Road Initiative help to promote the cooperation among civilizations? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by SIU-LEUNG, President of the Zheng He Society of the Americas. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to Dialogue, sir.
Sure.
Now, Dr. Li, whenever we speak of the Maritime Silk Road, one name would always get into our vocabulary, a name that has very important historic significance, General Zheng He. Now, when we say in Chinese, 郑和下西洋, Western Seas, here are some controversies about the definition of Western Seas. Does this phrase actually geographically refer to the Indian Ocean or the Pacific Ocean? We need to give a clear definition to this before we unfold our extensive discussion about the Maritime Silk Road.
Actually, the term Western Ocean is divided into minor and major. The minor Western Ocean is the Indian Ocean. And then there's a major West Ocean, that's Atlantic Ocean. There's another one, the Pacific Ocean, actually is a misnomer. It actually should be called Changmingzhong, the biggest blue deep ocean of all. It's the ancient of all oceans, which is labeled in the map, the universal map of 10,000 nations. This is the topic of my book.
You are the author of two books,
yes.
Dr. Li, and everything seems to focus on a map. First of all, can you tell us what has led you to the deep curiosity about General Zheng He, who allegedly is the first to have discovered North America instead of Christopher Columbus?
Actually, the inspiration didn't come from the map, but from a disc, a bronze disc, or brass disc, in fact, that was found in the Eastern America, North America. And
in fact, to be more precise, you found this medallion in the Appalachian Mountains.
That's right, near Asheville, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. And what happened later on?
And I was wondering why this medallion came out from such a very remote area with scantily populated. So I did all the research about the local area, and then each clue led me to another 3 or 4 clues. And this became an enormous project of research. And finally, I found the answer was in the, this map, this world map, entirely labeled in Chinese with a very accurate projection of the world, labeling all the continents, almost all the continents, including a little bit of Australia. And this is actually the proof for the voyages of Zheng He extending all the way to Americas.
Now, many of the observers, there are similar historians, pointed out that your discovery proves ridiculous. Now, what are their counter-arguments?
Well, the counter-arguments is all mostly in this map, because the European portion of the map is very ancient. It portrays a Europe that is before Metternich, who was supposed to be the author of the map. And it's before 1400, before Renaissance, European Renaissance. And Metternich, as an Italian Jesuit priest, should know the papal state where he was born. he didn't label that on the map. There's no Tuscany, no Florence, and many other names, for example, Paris and Ireland, are names used in the Roman era, which is 1,000 years before Meteorici. So that's one first part. The Europe is very ancient. America is even worse or more amazing. It portrays an America not known to European explorers until 200 years after Meteorici's death, which is impossible. And that's why the Europeans call this map the impossible black tulip, because they could not have drawn the map according to their own history of exploration. The Chinese portion tells us when this map was drawn, because it has names that are only affiliated with Yongle and Xuande era, not Wangue, which is when Meteorici presented this map.
I wonder if you have collected other evidence by archaeologists, for example, to support your argument that it is General Zheng He who has first arrived in North America instead of Christopher Columbus. For example, do you have any unearthed findings to support your argument?
Yes. There are actually Yongle coins that are found in Washington and Yukon between Canada and Alaska. And the flag that I mentioned of the Big Dipper is a major clue. And they mentioned the Big Dipper as the carrier of the message as it's carried by an ambassador from China to the American tribes before the Europeans came. There are actually rice paddies in South Carolina that are cultivated according to the Chinese measurement, which is impossible for Europeans to do, because Europeans during the 16th century did not even eat rice. And there are actually evidence from Jamestown, the first British colony in America, Jamestown in Virginia, that actually it's a work by CCTV. They have an interview with the excavation site at Jamestown and found Ming Dynasty, early Ming Dynasty, the civilian hewn blue and white bowls, fragments of bowls. And in addition to that, there's a segment of bamboo. Bamboo we know as a container for chopsticks and brushes. It's a very common utensil for Chinese. However, bamboos are not existing in America. They're not native to America. So it has to be brought in from the outside. And this is the first time the Europeans came to this Jamestown, and they found these relics in the bottom layer when they do the excavation. That means the Chinese have been there before. So there are many evidence like that. And also, for example, language. There are some language reminiscent of Chinese. Unfortunately, it's not the Putonghua that we are talking about. It is in the Ming Dynasty, Putonghua, which is actually closer to Hakka and the southern dialects. And so if one only reads or understands Putonghua today, as Beijing is, you cannot understand that the relationship between the Chinese culture and the tribal Americans.
Let's look at why other Chinese scholars who have done historical research disagree with you vehemently, and they respect the outcome of a Western academic research in this area.
My research began in 2006. That's when internet became available, especially some of the tools like the images videos started to become available. And also, I'm equipped by search of Western classical publications back to the 16th century. And it's through the study of the original Western publications that I am totally confident of my conclusion, because I compare the original work of Matteo Ricci in Italian and his translation into Latin, Spanish, French, English, and then Chinese. I found that very substantial discrepancies in these translations. Most of the most important parts of the original text has been omitted, discarded, and some of them have been mistranslated. For example, longitude has been translated to latitude, or vice versa, and so on. So it is a very fundamental work that allows me to overturn this history. The ancient history, or the historians now, they're looking at classical documents from Chinese, have been distorted, rewritten many times. And for example, the Chinese version of Matteo Ricci's own journal to China, it's translated from the English. The English one has made major mistakes, and it's 300 years after the European translations were done. And there's a big gap between the original European translations and also Matteo Ricci's original Italian version. So based on that version, I can tell you that Matteo Ricci really didn't participate in the drawing of this map. In his journal, he actually said that he never participated. He didn't have any version of the map himself. Now, if he was the author of the map, he should have at least a copy to proofread. He didn't. So that's why I said it's impossible for him to be an author. And this map is actually existing at the time he visited China. It is hidden in the imperial archives for some domestic political reasons.
You have challenged the three major schools of thoughts concerning the world history. First of all, General Zheng He stopped in East Africa in terms of his maritime adventures. Second is Christopher Columbus, who has discovered the new continent in North America. And the third is the Italian guy who brought the cartography of the world to China. We'll come back to examine why it is important to take a second look at your academic research after this break. And when we are joined by Madam He Wenping from CAS, the Institute of African Studies, we'll take a second look at why BRI is important in the framework of your academic research. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome back. In the second half of the program, we are pleased to be joined here by Madam He Wenping, a senior research fellow with the Institute of African Studies with the CAS. And also sitting with us is Dr. SIU-LEUNG, a historian who has made many amazing rediscoveries about who has first discovered the new continent in North America. Welcome to our show. I'm wondering aloud why General Zheng He, along with the big fleet, seem to have been better equipped than Europeans in those days to navigate and to carry out the missions that were authorized by the emperors. Now, I wonder if Madam He Wenping could brief us on your understanding concerning the technology and the skills that General Zheng He acquired even in those days, way ahead of Europeans, perhaps.
Yeah, of course. We all know, like, China has enjoyed 5,000 years more, those history, and our ancestors have developed what we call it a big for inventions, like even the campus. Yeah, without the campus, how could you, take your fleet on the sea? So all those very earlier inventions, I think, has been done by our ancestors. So that's why there's no doubt about that. By the Zheng He's time, I think that was in the Ming Dynasty, 15th century, sometimes around that time. So he had been led all those fleet all the way, like to such a far place. Now even we are talking about how to develop like our navy, from the called light sea and then to the deep blue sea. So, but the earliest that time, our like Zheng He led those fleet has already done that. So that's obviously a proof that we are far ahead of many other Western countries.
Yes, indeed. Armed with the barometers as well as live ammunition, gunpowder, General Zheng He was able to sail to not only Eastern Africa, but perhaps to the coastline of North America, and that's your discovery. Tell us more, please, Dr. Li. Technologically, do you think General Zheng He was more superior to Europeans?
Absolutely. The history of cartography in China is a very long one. Since Qing Dynasty, as all Chinese students remember, that this assassination of Qing Emperor, the first emperor, was with a dagger and a map. Embedded in the map. Yeah. So that map is not a simple map. It's a very detailed map indicating all the fortress, cities, rivers, mountains, and so on. So it's actually a presentation of his own territory to Qin, and that's why it attracted Qin Emperor's attention.
The map was presented along with the head.
That's right.
Someone who was beheaded to win the trust of.
Yeah, he beheaded himself to make this map more significant.
That did make a huge impact.
Yeah. So actually, in Han Dynasty, I think a lot of people already know that Ma Wangdui's map is surprised everybody with its detail and accuracy. So the tradition of map drawing stems all the way back to Qin, Han, and so on. So by Ming Dynasty, when Zheng He was in the having these 7 voyages, they actually traveled down to the southern hemisphere, which never had any Chinese done that.
Continental map drawing is one thing. Maritime map drawing is quite another.
Exactly.
How could you believe that General Zheng He, armed with the maritime map, may have discovered North America?
The map Kunyu Quantu is a very good evidence, because the Europeans said they could not have done that. And the whole map is labeled in Chinese. And who would you think has done that? The only one is Chinese. And the only one possibly have done that is Zheng He's fleet, because they were the only one with this capability commissioned by the emperor, with the resources and manpower and dedication to make this conviction.
Well, some of the Chinese historians, WENPING, are very proud of our ability to have created advanced craftsmanship. Instead of scientific laws about the universe, guided by the spirit of searching for truth in the world of uncertainty, scientists in Europe were able to make a lot of breakthroughs, and therefore they were way ahead of China since the end of the Opium War.
Of course, I think even though we have enjoyed a very glory historical period, like Ming Dynasty, even in the Tang Dynasty, also very, very glory time. But unfortunately, those emperors' time, sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down, up and down. And ever since the Qing Dynasty, and always down, always down. And then just like our historian scientists have just mentioned, sometimes they open, like open the door. and then can go all the way out of the sea and then to explore the new land, no matter how far they have gone. So which means they have a very open-minded, those emperors. But when some other emperors, when they're up, because they just, pay attention to their own this power, so they are not have an open mind to see what's going on in the rest of the world.
Peter the Great in Russia, he looked to the east. He looked to Europe instead of to Asia, despite the centuries, 2.5 centuries by Mongolians occupation. And also it reminds me of the Meiji Restoration in Japan. From then on, Japan started to become strong, and after defeating the Chinese Navy in Jiawu Zhenzheng, it established itself as the strongest navy and the strongest economy in Asia until Pearl Harbor, a tragedy, the beginning of its decline. So what have we learned from Japan and Russia in terms of scientific rediscoveries with which participants in the May the 4th movement 100 years ago shouted slogans like "Learn from the West, science and democracy"?
Well, let me inject one point here. I would say all the Western science has some Chinese influence in there, mainly from mathematics. The decimal system was invented in China, and we are talking about 24 hours, 12 shichen. These are all Chinese concepts from the Tiangan Di Zhi, the 12 and the 10 system. And the mathematics system actually is the basis for all the other sciences. For example, astronomy, geography, all stem from the mathematics. And without that, there is no such thing as the development of science. Now, I'd say that without China's silk, porcelain, tea, the Europeans wouldn't have looked for ways to come to China. The Silk Road actually is only the land road. The Maritime Road is actually a porcelain road mostly, and then the tea road. In addition to that, there's a spice road.
And perhaps paper making has also contributed to European.
You are bringing up a very good point. Paper making and typesetting. Actually, when the Mongolian Yuan dynasty went to Europe, they brought the Song, which is developed in Song dynasty, the typesetting and paper making. This stimulated thoughts in Europe, which in turn brings up the new Christianity apart from the old Catholicism. And because of the conflict between these two, Catholicism was the major religion at that time, and they tried to suppress the new Reformation's Christianity. And that's why the conflict actually stimulated the Christians had to flee to America for their life. And that's what built America. These people who fled the oppression by the Catholic Church became the new colonists in America. And you all know that the Tea Party in Boston Harbor is the first thing that started the American Revolution. Tea Party, where's the tea? Tea came from China. At that time, the British monopolized all the tea trades, and the colonists had to pay heavy duty to British Empire.
Yes, indeed, we exported tea, but they exported opium to China. Yeah. Well, having said this, the last question is very much about the enormous efforts by the Trump administration seeking to decouple the Chinese economy. But with the growing interconnectivity between major economies in this broad framework of a global supply chain is an easy job. The United States talks smart about freedom of navigation, free commerce, and yet what they have done seems to have violated the principles of free trade and globalization. Do you think the spirit of a Silk Road initiative could somehow enhance the frayed principles of globalization? Don't you think that will somehow add to the hostile coexistence between the first and the second biggest economy?
Of course, I think the spirit of this BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, is to promote this global connectivity. So that's why China, we doesn't want to separate, decouple with anyone. Not mention with the United States, the biggest market there, the superpower there. So we don't want to decouple with anyone. And rather we want to connect it with all of those countries. So that's why we are talking about those, land road and the Silk Road to connect with all those countries. That's why China, don't forget, after those 40 years reform and opening up, China now has been serving as the #1 trade partner with as many as 128 countries, including United States, so including a lot of small countries in the African continent. So we definitely need this free trade principle. So that's why I think I don't buy all those ideas saying decouple, U.S. now let their own like a partner together, and China maybe leading another partner with ourselves. It's not good for the globalization.
China has benefited enormously from the existing world trade order and world economic order, but with the glories of the ancient Silk Road, land or maritime alike, do you think our advocacy for the new Belt and Road Initiative would add to the American fears that China would assume world leadership? It wants to reshape the world order, and therefore the Chinese ambition must be compromised through these efforts to decouple the Chinese economy. Is it an easy job?
Yes, I think the decoupling of this initiative or of China and America and as represented by America, the rest of the so-called Five Eyes, is actually not going to help anything in the progress of the United States and the world. Progress can only be done by cooperation, by enhancing the better, not by knocking off the better one so that the slow one can catch up. And I don't think that's the best way to do it. It's respect, learning from each other, and sharing. I think those three things are the motivation for progress.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Madam He WENPING, for joining this meaningful discussion about General Zheng He and the fleet that he led in rediscovering the world, even in the Ming Dynasty. With that, we come to the end of this brainstorming on the Belt and Road Initiative. See you next time. Goodbye.